Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is John Miner. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. And is anyone from DataFest on monitoring? Alex, I assume?
Hi, I'm an attendee.
Okay, Alex, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. It's kind of interesting to be virtual nowadays. Hey, been doing it for 9 months, so got to get used to it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think these conferences are a great idea. Even if they are virtual, I think they're a great way to kind of just talk about best practices and exciting things that can make us more productive.
Definitely. What have you been working on?
So I'm self-employed and I freelance, and I help my clients develop like front-end applications, to the Amazon cloud.
Oh, okay, cool. I've, traditional background, got a ton of experience all over the place. Recently, last 10 years, been strictly focused on Microsoft products, so I'm MVP. Been doing a lot of Spark work lately. So, as long as you know SQL, you can have a job somewhere.
Yeah, I think this is
And,
a breakthrough. Don't you
excuse
think
me,
this is a huge breakthrough?
for what? Spark?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think like everyone's given in and they've started using SQL for queries. Like Spark is doing it, Amazon S3 is doing it. It's like a revolution to adopt SQL, in my opinion.
Yep, we were doing a lot of Databricks. Microsoft has been pushing that for the last 2 years, and now they're coming up with their own product. So they can see where the vision where everyone is going. So it's pretty interesting for sure. So pleasure to meet you, Alex. If you want, I'm gonna do a couple intros and then I'm gonna hide my mic too. And if you want, you can hide your mic and we're gonna actually record this for the hour. So let me start with talking about what we're gonna talk about today. So again, my name's John Miner. I'm a data architect at Insight. Okay. And we're going to talk about extending Power BI with Python, and it's extremely easy to do. I do have a couple an old blog and one I currently write at. So if you're curious about, SQL, go see craftydba.com. I have a ton of articles out there. You might catch me once in a great while on Twitter. It's all usually professional. No Donald Trump types of tweets. Some things am passionate about is PASS. This week is PASS is having the annual conference. Unfortunately, just too busy at work to actually attend. Locally, there's a bunch of code camps like Boston Code Camp. Again, like I said, I'm a Microsoft MVP, tons of certificates in the database area as well as data science. I think data science is an interesting field, just don't have enough time to actually do anything in it. And last but not least, I'm Microsoft certified. So let me show you some links and I'll go back to here, just make sure everyone's muted. So I hear some background noise. Hang on.
Oh, that was me. I'm sorry, John.
No problem. So I just want to make sure everyone's muted. We're all set. And I'm going to actually go doc. So we'll talk and have a 5-minute recap at the very end. So I'm going to turn off my camera and we're going to actually try to make this professional. So if you're curious about finding me, I'm the Crafty DBA on Twitter. I also run the Rhode Island SQL Server user group. We haven't had as much fun this year as in past years. It's one of those things you can get out of the house and talk to other people. You can see 3 of us were sitting here. We actually did a lot of work, had about 100 people join. If you don't recognize Grant Fritchie, he's the past president of PASS. So just a little blurb from my group. I'm going to start closing these down. What are we going to be talking about today? If you want this code, go out to GitHub under community work. I have every single presentation I pretty much talked about. And this one is extending Power BI with Python, okay? I'm going to close this tab. Next tab is SQL Server downloads, okay? So one of the things we're going to be using today is I always try to wiggle SQL in it, and with Power BI, you need to have some type of data set. I'll show you how to do these examples without a data set. It's a little trick, but this is the SQL Server engine. You can download it. I usually use it's free. Power BI is free again, and bring down the desktop version. last but not least, we're doing Python. So if you don't know about Anaconda, take a look at Anaconda. And like I said, nowadays, if you know SQL and Python, you'll be more than busy. And if you go ahead and mix in Spark, you'll be crazy busy like I am lately. We talked about the community work, and last but not least, MS SQL tips. I do write a lot on MS SQL tips, so if you're curious about a bunch of Azure topics, go out here. I also talk about Power BI. My most interesting thing I'm recently talking about is how to manage Power BI datasets, workspaces, and reports with PowerShell. So enough about me, and let's get into the presentation. And let me see if I saw someone pop up. Yep, and there's all the things, and also, like I said, this is being, taped, and you can go ahead and go to MS SQL tips and find those tips, and just look me up, John Miner, and you'll find most of my stuff. So, what we need to do is we need to create a test environment to do this on, because they lock everything down at my home, office computer at Insight. Security is important, but guess what? I set up a whole environment here. So I got the Power BI installed, I got SQL installed, and I have Anaconda installed. So let's take a look at the presentation deck, and we'll get up to the examples. So always have this slideshow, and maybe tell me, Timothy, if I did this right. Is it showing correctly?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Sometimes it goes in the wrong version, and then I'm like, hey, no one's seeing anything, and I'm like, yes, did I do it?
You're good. You're good.
Awesome. So what is Power BI? Power BI is a business and analytics service that delivers insights to enable fast and informed decisions, okay? And there's two languages that are core to it. The first one is how do you bring data in? And it's called the M language, and it's short for mashup language, okay? And it's actually a functional language based on F#, which is kind of cool. And the DAX language, and DAX is kind of love-hate. It's not as bad as the query language for cubes, but MDAX, but DAX is okay, right? And so what we're going to do is M is to pull the data in, DAX is to do those extra things. So if we're going to do measures, calculated columns, you can do it in DAX, calculated columns, you can do it in M, and you definitely have to have relationships. So we're not going to really focus on Power BI. We're going to worry about, the visuals in this, but I just want to give you a little background. So you can explore the data, and you can do it on-premise, right? And it's free. On-premise, you just download the Power BI desktop, and boom, you're off and running. In the cloud, you can go ahead and get your own version. I think it's, always forget the levels, but you got the free, which you can't share with anyone, so you can just do it yourself. The pro is $10 a month. You can share with other people. And then obviously, if you're in a big organization, you want premium. So that allows you not only to share with other people, but to actually put a dedicated compute behind it, okay? Now, one of the things I do see with organizations when they start using Power BI is issues with governance and security, okay? So two things to keep really top of the mind if you're working with a client or your organization. How are you governing how these are deployed, right? And reporting is almost like code development, right? There should be an SDLC behind it. There should be a low environment. There should be an upper environment. You can use this PowerShell I showed you at DevOps to do CI/CD, so you can push from one environment to another. There's a couple widgets out there from a core. You can look at those too. Business problems. So most developers use the Power BI desktop to design visuals and publish to the service. So out of the box, there's a lot of visuals. In fact, I should update this. Last time I looked, which was about a year and a half ago, and I did this presentation, is 29 visuals, right? And guess what? If you go to appsource.microsoft.com, you add another 208 visuals. So you got a lot of choices out there, right? But you might have a business problem that you might have a visual that can't actually handle the data you have, and if so, how do you solve that problem? I had one such case in which I wanted to do like a 3D model for machine learning, in which the company was, a petroleum company, and they wanted to go ahead and look at a sucker pump and do a waveform off actually an instrument. And so to draw that in a 3D space, it's really hard to do with, even the custom visuals and so on. But there's a ton of stuff you can do with either R or Python. Both are supported. And we're going to talk about Python today, because even though Microsoft bought Revolution R a few years ago, most people are going down the Python path. So, business solution. Python was integrated in a desktop product in late of 2018. The online service was recently updated a year ago in April of 2019, and there's only some core packages supported. So, you can do anything you want on premise as long as it's installed. But in the cloud, these are the packages that are actually supported. So you got matplotlib, which gives you most of your drawing that you typically need, like box charts, line charts, etc. Scatter graphs. NumPy is good for like if you have data and arrays. Pandas is great for data sets. Okay, you got scikit-learn, SciPy. They have some plotting in there, but they're also machine learning as well as stat models. And Seaborn's a really cool product out there. It kind of gives the matplotlib's boring visuals a notch up, right? They're really snazzy. So what's the we're going to talk about today, the presentation overview, right? It's like a little syllabus. We're going to talk about configuring your desktop. How do we do it? And we're going to talk about Python scripting in Power BI. How does it work? We're going to talk about distribution of visuals. We're going to in distribution visuals, I'm talking about how to distribute the data, not distribute the visual with your Power BI, okay? We're also going to talk about correlation visuals. So how does one value X correlate with Y, right? There's also Rankin visuals and pot of hole visuals. So like maybe a pie chart. They have some really cool things that are like a donut breakout chart, which would work really well if you have in the round like theta or something like that. Or if you can only show half the pie chart, then you can actually do an amphitheta. And we'll talk about data cleaning with Python. You can do it. It's kind of there for those data scientists that really want to do it. I just usually use the M language because if I'm in, Power BI, I like to use their tools. But if you're really handy and you had some cool, nifty way that you wanted to clean up the data, you could definitely do it with Python. So desktop configuration. I don't know if you know this or not, but there are two Python out there. There's Python 2x and 3x. So use 3x. At the beginning, I showed you a bunch of links. One of them was the Anaconda installation. I really like the Anaconda installation because it's all combined and it gives you several things. First, it gives you Spider, and Spider is like your IDE. It's kind of like SSMS for SQL, okay? And you can write programs in there. You can actually test this code in there, okay? Second thing that's really cool is that you can go ahead and launch Conda prompt, and you can actually install new packages. So you can use pip, you can use Conda to actually bring packages in that are not there. Main thing is if you want to be in the cloud, make sure you pick from the supported list. It's probably already installed. If you don't care about it and you're doing it locally, then you can just pick anything you have, okay? And Power BI changes all the time. So you want to grab the latest version of Power BI. I noticed recently, or maybe the last few months, they changed the icon. It used to be the Power BI icon. Now they have these little pillars, which is kind of cool. If you want to cheat and you don't want to install these separately like I did, you can download an image called the Data Science Virtual Machine. It has everything pre-installed. It might not be the latest version, so that's why I like building this from scratch. So how do we do Python scripting? You just basically drag the Python visual onto the desktop. You drag the fields into the section, you double click the visual and start coding, okay? And so you automatically have this variable called dataset, which is a pandas object, which has your data from the actual M language. So whatever was pulled into the X velocity engine behind the hood is the X velocity engine where everything's stored. Okay, that data is pulled into this data set and you can actually use it. Now, what's the interesting thing is that, these machine learning algorithms have been around for a while and Python's been around for a while. Since like 1991, if I remember, when I always forget his name, Guido something made it back in 1991. But the main thing is that there is a bunch of sample data out there. So for instance, if you wanted to look at the iris data set, which is a popular data set for data science because you can do correlation as well as clustering, it's just there. So you can actually use those for demonstrations, okay? So we're gonna look at the very first example. It's the violin pot. Okay, so I'm going to get out of my slide deck right now and slide this down, and we're actually going into, okay, a virtual machine. So I got the same thing, less I did not install PowerPoint. And here's some notes here. Okay, one thing I really want to point out, and this is not here, but look at this note. Make sure you do a screenshot of this, okay? problem is I downloaded it today and I spent about half an hour figuring this out. The newest version of Conda does not put in the path variables, and guess what? When you install Power BI, it just doesn't work. Okay, so to save you some wasted time, make sure you copy this. Actually, what I'm going to do is I will paste it in here so you don't have to waste the valuable time that I did this today actually going ahead and trying to do this. Okay, so back to our presentation. So in here, I'm going to show you a few things, and then we'll talk specifically about Power BI. You can go in and out, right? So meaning that if you want, you can actually do all the coding and testing in, um, Python. Okay, so let's bring up the violin shot, and I'm going to take an example that is in our code, and I'll snip it into actual Spider, which is their own environment, and run it, and I'll show you how it looks there versus how it looks on Power BI. And then for the heck of it, we'll do one from scratch. So this is a typical environment. You write some code here like hello world. And if we run hello world, it runs the program and we get hello world. And this is just output, right? So nothing fancy. There's no cool graphics there, okay? So we're going to open up the very first one. And one of the things that Microsoft doesn't have included with the toolset is a violin plot. And here's the new logo from Microsoft. So I don't know if Tim can tell me, when did they start using this new logo?
I'm not sure. I believe it popped in about 8 to 6 weeks ago.
Okay, because I was new. I spend most of my time lately. There's so much Spark work and Databricks work out there.
Uh-huh.
I'm like just focused on that, and I let the junior kids, go ahead and have fun with the actual plotting. But I was just curious when it came in. So all these plots right here, this is all Python, okay? And what you can do is if you're curious about, you click on it, you get a script editor, okay? Now this one is actually, we're pulling some libraries in, right? And we're actually loading a data set. So this is actually a piece of code that I can snip because I'm not actually using a data set. I'm actually pulling from the libraries, okay? So the pound actually comments something out. So I'm just gonna comment this out, paste this in, and let's run it and see what happens. So is there something new? Default pane by default. To make them appear inside the column, uncheck the mute and the plots pane menu option. Okay, well, let's look at plots. So anyways, this is something new. This is Spider 4. I'm used to Spider 3. And now it's telling me that, hey, by the way, you can look at stuff like you can see that we declared, remember I told you that data frame? This is what a data frame is. It's basically a bunch of NumPy arrows, and then the NumPy vectors can be either string or, this is decimal or integer. Okay, so it looks like a table, smells like a table, but really isn't a table, right? And then if you look at the plots, we can see the actual plot. And this one's actually looking at a set called tips, right? And the tips is, hey, what's the total bill, okay, that was come back, and what day do I get tipped the most, and who is it from? Is it a person that's a smoker and non-smoker? This is kind of mute nowadays because, not many places still allow people to smoke inside, but you can see that if we're just looking at days in which, the biggest bulk of it is actually high, right? We can see that non-smokers on Friday seem to tip a lot, right? But most of them are 20s here. But if you look at the average, Sunday does not good, not that bad too. Thursday, you get some decent tips, but they're mostly lower. And then if your chance of getting something that's way out of range, like someone really had a really good meal, that's probably on a Saturday, right? And so it's a cool violin plot. I just showed you how you do this. A couple things to mention. One is filter warnings off, ignore. Sometimes you'll get a warning from when using this in Power BI. If you put that, it'll guarantee that you don't actually see the warning, okay? So going back to here, let's go to the very first one. So the very first one is just a very simple one-dimensional plot. We're not doing two data sets, right? So we can see it's the data that I pulled in from the Iris data set. And if we go ahead and we go under Edit Query, okay, in Advanced Properties, let's take a look. Okay, so in this one, I actually installed a local SQL database, and it has the Iris data set. So if we go ahead and we take a look here, and we do select 1,000 rows, And again, you have to be a little master of all these technologies, or at least a jack of all trades, not master of any, right? And so you need to know a little Python, you know a little Power BI desktop, and you need NoSQL or whatever the data source you're familiar with, right? So in this one, we can see there's an ID, and basically, this was about irises, flowers, right? And there's 3 types of flowers, so you can classify them by setosa, okay, and then there's another name down here, which is what's it, versicolor, and then the last one is Virginia. And those 3 data types have the sepal and petal are the size of the inside of a flower, okay? And one's a width and one's a length. And if you measure those, okay, you can actually narrow down, given some dimensions, you can pick, hey, it's this species, okay? So that's why it's predictive. So you can do a binary classification. Also, you can do a clustering because these actual items are right next to each other, okay? So on this one, we can see this data is actually being pulled in, okay? And we're actually plotting it, right? So the plot's here, and if we look at the code and we can go up, okay, we can see that the data set is saying dataset/species. So we're pulling right from this one, and we're saying species and septal length. We pick in the palette, okay, and usually when you do this, it's matplotlib and .pyplot. Okay, that's the actual library reference. So it's the main library, sub-library, and we're referencing it as a different name. So this is a mnemonic, okay? So plot show. This one's also Seaborn SSS. Again, it's just like that as statement in T-SQL, in which you can rename a table to a mnemonic or abbreviation. And this is SSNS, do my violin plot. So I first plot it, and I show it. Now, if I did 2 or more, then you could do 2 statements here and hit show, okay? So I think I've explained the basis of how plotting works, okay? And now we can do some interesting stuff. For instance, in this one, if we maximize it and take a look, we can see now that we actually have different colors, okay? And we also see we have a kind of small box block here, and we can see that this is the min and this is the max. This is the second quartile, the third quartile, and this is the median, right? And so you can have all this information packed into one little report. We showed how you can compare 2 of them at the same time. This is a real nice one because now not only we're doing the reports, whoops, hit the wrong one. It's the one below, is it? There we go. This is the one I want to show. Not only are we doing the reports, but the interesting thing about the iris data set, it's only 150 data points. So we can see we're plotting actual text here if you want to do additional text, okay? And if you're curious about these, I'll show you at the end, there's some links, and I have some really good links to different places that you can steal code because I don't know this by heart, but there's plenty of examples out there and I can imitate really well, right? So we're going to load the data set, okay, this is from the library again. And then we're going to do the box plot, which we did before. But then guess what? We're actually figuring out the median of the values, okay, grouped by species, okay? So we're actually taking the data frame, okay, and we're grouping by species. And then for each one, we're getting the median values, okay, which is array, and then we're getting counts. And then what we're doing is we're going and creating a list. And for each one on the list, we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to plot where it is, okay? So this is quite complex, but I didn't do this from scratch. I just kind of borrowed it. So if we wanted to create a new page, how do we do this, right? So we have a new page, right? And I'm going to show you one more time, and then we'll talk about the different types of visuals because it's all the same once you do one. So you're going to draw. First, you have to make sure it's set up correctly. And when you set it up, okay, one of the things you want to do is you want to go into options and settings, advanced options, okay? And underneath there's going to be a couple boxes. There's going to be our scripting. If you're doing our scripting Python, make sure you get the right Python directory. Make sure you follow the link that did the actual additional settings. But if you're curious where they are, you do control panel. And again, I'm going in depth in the weeds on this, unfortunately, but I think it's really important because I spent a lot of time today looking at it. In system, you'll find that there's advanced settings, okay, and environment path. And then what I did is I found that directory and I added these paths to it. So if you look down here, you'll see Anaconda, 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 Anaconda. So by adding these 4 paths, suddenly everything worked. Before then, I was actually getting library errors, okay? So close. So we talked about the advanced options. We drew it on. So the next thing is, what we need to do is we need to have some type of data set. So for instance, say I'm going to go a little off base on here. We can say get data, right? And we can more. Waiting for it to come up, and then SQL Server database. I know I have a local SQL Server, so I'm going to pull something else. So just do local and Power BI data and hit OK. Okay, use current credentials, good enough. It likes me, I hope so. Microsoft account. I didn't create a database user. What happened? I didn't do anything. Still thinking. Okay, for some reason it logged in me, and I don't know why I did, but whatever. And no, I'm going to do is no transformation, so I'm just going to load it. So remember that data set when we had tips? I'm going to hit apply changes. I'm actually pulling in the iris data again, and I'm actually pulling in the tips, and now we can see the tip data, okay? So say if I wanted to do something different, I can just drag this over or click on this, right? And then where is it? Values, add values here. So the values, say I wanted to go ahead and figure out the total bill, right? And I wanted to look at the total bill, and I'm curious about when was the day a week, and for instance, what gender actually goes ahead and gives me a bit better tips, right? So now I can come over here, and whoops, wrong button. Always forget this. So now at this point, this is commented out, but it says, hey, by the way, you can get a data frame and show total bill, day a week, and sex, right? So I'm going to steal some code because, again, like I said, imitation is the best way to get ahead. And so we can see this one's plotting. This one's good enough, right? So we're plotting. So we're going to try to do this really quick. Control C, minimize this, and we're going to go to page 2. And whoops, did I get rid of it? Nope, I didn't get rid of it. Just couldn't find it. And let's maximize this. Let's go here. Control V. And so what we're going to do is this time we can take this. And so it says the data frame has total bill, day a week, and sex, right? So we don't need this one. So we can get rid of this because the data set's already loaded, right? And we have and we're going to have sex here. So we're going to do sex. And we can just hopefully pass it just data set, right? Hopefully that works. Data set. Okay, show the visual, and that's it. So now if we click the run button, and if I didn't break anything, hopefully it works. And what does it say? See more, it says script. Could not interpret day. Okay, so it's looking for day, but guess what? This is actually day a week, right? So we need to put in day a week, and let's run this again. We just have to read. And voila. So it's probably not the best graph I ever did because maybe something wrong with the data set. I'd have to investigate, but you can see I'm actually starting on the path. I got the male and female here. Actually, it's probably doing a sum. So if we go to values and instead of do summarize, hit don't summarize. And there you go. Guess what? There's my graph. Cool. Does anyone have any questions? Because I'm going to pause here because the rest of the half an hour I'm going to talk about is I'm going to just talk about visuals and go through them and show you which ones are out there. But this process right here is the key process, okay?
No questions in the chat box. Oh, wait. I used the R script before, but it takes a while to plot whenever I open the workbook. Is there any way to speed up the R script?
Well, we're talking about Python, so no, I can't tell you there. I learned R when I was at Microsoft in 2016, and then I forgot it right away when I went back to consulting because a lot of people are doing Python with Spark. So sorry, I can't help you. If you still have an issue with it, I'm sure we can get you someone on the product group to look at it. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Python, I like it a lot, and so that's what we're talking about today. So I just can't answer that one. Cool. So no other questions. I'm going to save this and we'll get back to the slide deck. And, that what I just showed you there is the basis of everything that you're going to be doing with Python, okay? So we talked about scripting, and we showed you the violin part. Let's talk about different visuals that can be out there. So we can also do plot distribution data over a range of values, right? That's a distribution, right? And so one of the things you want to do with these is you have to pay attention to bin size, okay? So if you have a bin size without a smoothing pattern, okay, then you have something that looks like a histogram, right? We're also going to talk about box plot. Box plots are really cool because it'll tell you how far it goes. We showed the violin plot, which was kind of cool, and kernel density plots. And kernel density plots, there's many different types. You can do, like hexagrams and all types of things. So it can get quite interesting. Okay, so we're going to look at examples 2, 3, and 4 in my slide deck over here. So let's bring back to the KDE, which is a kernel density. As for going faster, you said it was taking a long time. The only thing I can tell you also is that, whoops, I think I'm in the wrong place. So I'm running it local. We're not going to do that. Sorry. The only thing I can do is throw more memory at it. Obviously, this is an memory database, right? So I knew I didn't want you to be asking me questions and going really slow. So I have 8 CPUs and I got 56 gigs of memory. So this is a really decent machine. And so, I didn't want to sit here and talk to you and just wait for the visuals to spin. They do spin, but not as much as others. So adding more memory to probably might help with this situation. So in this one, we have a values axis, okay? And this is just basically we're plotting a bell curve, right? And so we can see the code here. I'm not going to really go too much more in the code other than by mistake hitting it once in a while, and I'm just going to maximize it. So we can see that we're plotting, okay, the septal width and finding the range, and we can also see the medians, just an interesting one. Most of these plots, you can do different things with them, right? So this one's the same plot. The only difference is we're rotating the axis, right? So the values on the x-axis versus the range on the y and vice versa, okay? We can also take something and we can plot 2 of them, right? So this one's plotting septal width. I think it's, let me double check, it's plotting 2 or 1. Let me look. Septal width, septal width. Okay, so we're plotting the same one. But okay, so what this is doing, it's changing the bin width, okay? So bin width of, we can actually do this on the fly, which is kind of cool, right? So we're going to actually comment this out, and I'll tell you which one actually makes it thinner versus thicker. So if we run this again, and it might take a side, we can see that a 1/2 inch, 0.5 value back for a bin, a value. So, you got 1, 1.5, 2. That bin width, okay, gives us a really nice smooth curve because it actually doesn't have that many data points, okay? When we actually reduce the bin width to what, 5/10, 500ths, right? Now we get something that's much rougher, okay? So these is where, as a designer, you have to go through and understand what the requirements are, and you want to see how you're going to change it. And we can see now that this width, which is more finer, okay, actually produces a rougher chart because you're getting the spikes, you're showing them up here, versus if you take this, you're taking more of an average and it's going to give you a slope curve, okay? Last but not least, we showed these 2, but you can plot 2 on the same graph, okay? So close, don't save. Box plots. What's all about box plots? I really like box plots. I don't see them used often enough. They're really cool because they tell me where the center of gravity is on the data. We can see where the median is. We can see where most stuff resides between the first and I meant the second and the third quartile. That's your median, which is the boundary between the second and third quartiles, right? Then you get your fourth and fifth, and then you can have some outliers, okay? I don't see too many outliers on here, but with this, you have a bunch of actual, like everything else we've been shown, there's a bunch of options to change the graph, okay? So this is a standard one, and we can see that Setosa, okay, starts at roughly maybe 4.7, goes to 5.4, before, not a big deal. And we can see the other ones, right? So it doesn't give us too much information. Now what we can do now is we can actually plot, okay, data points right next to it. So the more data points we have, okay, which is a jitter line, okay, we can actually determine, wrong plot, sorry. Click here and then try this again. There we go. On the jitter line, we can see when we plot this, okay, it's actually going to plot more points. So we can see there's an outlier here, a couple outliers here. And again, we have 50 points, so we can see that, this is probably a percentage of those, but that's where the data lies. We can see it's centered, clustered right here mostly. And then this one's spread out all over the place. And this color doesn't do too much well for me to visualize it, but we can see we have 1 point here, one real extreme outlier, another outlier here. But this one's spread pretty average. So the jitter line gives you some more information. Again, we can do the same thing we did on the violence. We can actually put n equals if you want to do some graphing. Say maybe you wanted to go ahead and put something different, okay? Say you wanted to put a median there, you maybe wanted to do standard deviation, whatever, you can put different values here, okay? And this is the same box plot, but now we're doing side by sides for categorical, okay? So when we're doing categories, okay, we have a box plot, but now we can actually see the total bill versus the day a week versus smoker, non-smoker. And we can see these are outliers, okay, because when we go to the non-smoker, these are way outside. We can see there's a few outliers here too, so interesting stuff. Oops, I always hit that. You can also use your own editor on these. I personally just use the default, so which is here, because usually the scripts are really small. I usually, when I'm playing with them, I'll test them in Python, make sure they work, and then paste them over. So we talked about kernel density. We talked about box plots. Let's talk about histogram. Okay, so now what we can do now is we can do a colored KD, okay? And so this is your, whoops, hit the wrong button again. This is your standard KDE, and it looks like a histogram, right? So this is your basic histogram. It's nothing big. You got your septal length, and you got the number of values at those separate lengths. So if you had something here or here, it would just figure out the total between the bin weight, and then just put a box at that level, okay? Now, if we're interested, we can do interesting things on top of it. We can also do a ragged bin weight, and then we can plot on top of that the histogram of KDE, okay? And then we can do a rug. So the rug is kind of like the jitter line, and what the rug is that more dense, whoops, wrong one again, sorry. Gotta get these, click, and then click. There we go. And the rug, you can tell this is not enough data here, and it's pretty evenly distributed between 4.5 and 7. But if there was, you would have darker colors or more tighter grouping in the rug here, so you'd know more data is here versus this. We can see from 4.5 to pretty much 7.4, whatever, I'm just guessing. That's most of the data, and you can see how it's reflected right here. So it gives you a little more insight into the data. This is a similar one. The only thing is I rotated this and I didn't get rid of I got rid of the rug. I'm also doing it on septal length, which is the same type, okay? Last but not least, say we wanted to print, okay, a bunch of them, right? We can do that, okay? And let's take a look at the code really quickly. So if I remember what this is called correctly, this is interesting too, because where is it? We can, there's something called figures. So we can set the number of figures, okay? Figure size we can show, and we can also do, yeah, this is distributions plot. So we just keep on adding to this, and we're telling it the subplots. We have 2 by 2 subplots, and we give it the figure size, okay? And that's how it works. So we can see now we got septal length, and septal width, and petal length, and petal width. We're doing basically the histogram with the KD faceting KDE over it, which is not colored, okay? So let's go back to here. So I'm just trying to show you a variety of charts that you can do with Power BI and Python. Some of these are not supplied anymore in out of the box. So, you know, these are actually for you. So correlation visual. So what we can do is we can do a scatter plot. We can do a connected scatter plot, a bubble plot, a heat map, a 2D density plot, a parallelogram, okay? And these are really interesting in visualizing the relationship between X and Y. If we go to 5 to 10, I remember I think I got tired of breaking these up, so I think I have tabs. That's why it's 5 to 10. And each tab will have some examples. And it always asks you to enable because obviously it could be something harmful here. Okay. So what we're looking at is a basic scatter plot. And, you know, we have all three types here, but you can't distinguish each three of the types here, right? It just shows this, and this is great for like that example in which I said I had a waveform from a machine, and I wanted to plot the waveform, and given the waveform, it categorized the machine as, hey, you know, the pump valve's leaking, or needs maintenance right away, or everything fine. And again, it was a bunch of different categories, but that, you know, a scatter plot could be used easily, you know, print XY values and get some type of picture from it, okay? And what's more interested when you do an iris is to actually go ahead and color and put a legend on it, okay? And once you color and put a legend, you can actually see the clustering, okay? And that's why this is a good data set for clustering, because we can see Sestosa is really stands right out. This blue one is one outlier, right? And we can see Virginia and Versicolor are overlapping, okay? So we can see that there is actually the orange here and the green here, and that's why data scientists like using this for testing clustering algorithms, like k-means clustering. And this one shows you that you can take that, and if you're curious, you can actually change the values. Instead of having bubbles, we can do X's. We can do something that looks like a little flying machine over here, like a bird or something like that. And so we can see that we've actually changed the color, the actual image that's being plotted, but we have the same data. And last but not least, we can also use transparency. So if we're curious about where things overlap and we wanted to use the same color, we can see that there's an intersection. So we can see that, you know, certain areas there's more overlapping than others. And I don't think that overlapping so much when you pull out. When you're close like this, you can see it, but when you're far away, it doesn't show up. This is something I just want to show you. I don't really know the use of this other than maybe the stock market, okay? It's a connected scatter plot, okay? So you have time, like the stock market, you have time going across, right? And, you know, like Tim and I have some stock in Microsoft, so you might be seeing the ticker going up and down during the day for Microsoft, right? And this could be interesting to plot, okay? I don't know any other use than something that's time series. This one is one of the ones that's out of the box, and so it's just another way to do it, and I'll skip over it. The interesting thing is the example I usually use in Power BI is how to do this over time. So when time travels, you can see the bubbles moving up and down. Now, this is a really cool graph because what it does, it actually uses a algorithm, say like Pearson's coefficient, okay, to actually see if you know, two things are related to us. And you know, if we were talking in person, I would say, why is there ones right across the middle? Anyone want to answer that question? Well, it's very simple. If you correlate septal length against itself, which this is supposed to be repeated up here, you can see it's 100% correlation, right? And so you can see that petal length, okay, or petal width, okay, for some reason it's correlated really well with septal length, okay, but you know, we can see that septal length, weak correlation. So we can see that, you know, these are not really correlated, right? Because petal length has nothing to do with septal length, and same thing with petal septal width. These are highly correlated though. See, we can see that these two are highly correlated, so that's the values you want to look at. And then the same thing over here. So if you go petal length there, septal length, we can see that this value is really high and this value is really high. So these are why you can actually pick these things out. And if you know the length and the width, right, you can actually figure out pretty much correlation to what category is, what type. There's some really cool charts when it comes to KDEs and 2 density charts and overplotting, right? So we can do a scatter plot here, which is this one. We can also do a hex bin chart. We can do a 2D hex bin chart. We can start doing Gaussian, and we can do like shading so we can see a blur, and then we can do contour, okay? So these are more advanced chartings, and if you want, just go look at the, you know, documentation on how to do it. Now, I like this one a lot because a lot of times when you look at data, you wonder how it correlates, right? So this is something called a pairwise chart, and a pairwise plot allows you to go ahead and do scatter graphs as well as, and again, I'm trying to get to maximize. Well, let's just do this. Minimize this, minimize that, minimize that. There you go. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to, you get your legend here, and what it allows you to do is if we have sepal length here and we have sepal width here, we can see our clustering, right? And if we got petal width here and say petal width here, then we know it's a correlation 100%. So you know what it's going to do is not going to give you a scatter plot because there's no x, y, it's just one value. You know what it's going to do is it's going to give you a distribution of the three. So we can see that the distribution between these two is one distinct one because we knew that Setosa was by itself, and we know there's an overlap between Versicolor and Virginia. Okay, so it's a really interesting thing when you're doing data science. You want to get a quick look at data. It's a good way to go. Okay, so we talked about that ranking visuals. So bar chart, box plot. There's some that are kind of out there. I put them in, but we'll take a look at them. There's a parallel plot. Probably never used it. Lollipop. Word cloud's kind of cool, but guess what? You really can't use them with the cloud service. So if you can do it online, obviously, I mean, in on premise, but you know, if you want to do it in cloud, it's not going to be supplied in Spider. And I think I left a bug in one of these to show you how you can, if you come across something that's not working, it's either this one or part of whole. I left a bug. We'll show you how to debug it and to actually go ahead and get it working. Okay. Checking that out. I keep on wanting to hit the wrong one. That's confusion when you have desktop inside desktop. So let's go back here to this one. Should have moved those examples in the subdirectory. So I'm going to try to finish up on time. So we got about 8 minutes. So I'm going to fast track this and go right over it. Before you know it, an hour flies by. So let's go to page 0 and look at the bar chart. So we can see bar chart, and you can do this in the regular visuals, nothing to write home about. We can see the box plot, and we've talked about this box and whiskers, and it's good, right? Parallel plot. I don't see any use for this. It basically plots each line, the 4 points across it, dividing it. So I just put it out there. Hey, it's something you can plot. Who knows what you can use it for? Lollipop chart. So you're taking each one and you're putting a period. Kind of reminds me of the connected scatter graph, in which you have stock symbols going across, like the values, and time going this way. again, not an instant use for it. Okay. This one's kind of cool. Everyone's seen this. It's a word cloud. Okay. This one I was having some issues with, so I don't know. Okay, so I still don't have, and this one is a spider chart. So if you have something in multiple dimensions, then this could be something that could be interestingly plotting and show you some type of visual, okay? And let's see what else we got. Let's not do this one. So let's cancel, execute, boom. So we talked about that, pot of hole, so stacked, treegram, Venn diagram, donut, which I talked about, pie chart, tree diagram. I'm gonna do that over and just make sure I get through the last of this. So there were some limitations, right? The data frame size. Remember I showed there's a data frame behind this? It can only be 150,000 rows or 250 megabytes at most. Execution time, 60 seconds, it has to come back and draw, okay? Consumption, you can only use 1 gig, disk IO, 1 gig per second. And you know, the image size for a visual in format is PNG is 2 megabytes. Okay. Cleaning with data. Typically, M language is used to mash up and clean up data that's important in Power BI. You can do this both with now R and Python. Okay, and this features under GUI path is data edit queries transformation. So we'll take a look at that before closing. Let's go back to the last example, par of whole. Again, every time we go in, hit enable. This won't be the same experience you have in the cloud, though. It just works. Okay. So some of these we have already visuals, but I just want to do a full coverage of what's in Python. So you get the stack visuals, and you can put obviously labels, a lot more stuff on there. Same thing with tree plot. It's basically same thing. Venn diagram. So let's take a look, see if we can get this one working. So we can see, okay, that import Venn3 from matplotlib, right? So it's Venn, VENN3, right? So how do we fix this, okay? We have an Anaconda installed, right? And Anaconda, okay, sometimes doesn't have all the libraries installed, and this is one of them. That's why it's not supported in the cloud. But if we want to just play around with it locally, we get an Anaconda prompt. We just want to do a pip install, right? And I think it was Venn3, okay? We sit back, and what's going to do is could not find a version that satisfies the requirement. So let's make sure that was the path. Says in Venn3, maybe just Venn. Okay, so it's not Venn3, but Venn. And okay, and then close, and then minimize, and then let's run this again, see if it works. Nope. So does this come from matplotlib Venn? So let's see if this is it. Okay, pip install. There we go. And now let's run this and see if this works. Come on. There we go. So this is something that you probably don't have out there. You can do Venns and you can put actual products inside or numbers inside. So it's kind of cool. Donut. This is great for if you had to turn around, or if even if you do a half donut, you can do that. So you can display data that. One of the things you can do is pie charts here, but pulling out pie charts and other features, sometimes it's interesting. And so you can do that. And this last one I didn't get working, so I am just going to cancel that. One of the things we want to do, though, is I think we talked about taking a quick look at this. So home, get data. What was the link that I put in there? I put the path in it. So GUI path, data, edit queries, transformations. So let's say, and again, I always forget this. So edit query. Okay. And then where's the transformations? If anyone sees it, okay, right here. So at the end, you have two things. You can go ahead and run your R script, or you can run your Python script. And so at this point, if you run it, holds the input of the script. So we could say, for instance, let's just set all the IDs, right? So data set sub, and then again, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going a little off-road on here, but let's set everything to 1, and let's see if it changes it. And continue. And local, it's asked me for privacy, so I'm just going to do public. I don't care about this because it's just test. Hit save. And let's see. Hopefully it just overrides everything with 1, which I was telling it to do. And so we got a data set and a table. If we look at the table, and guess what? It worked, right? It overwrote something with 1, which is not a real cool transformation, but it's definitely done. Okay. So that, I think, concludes all my demos. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me do a wrap up. Always like the slide. Boom. So I grew up in the black and white range back in the 70s. I remember we had a TV. It was a console TV. This thing was huge, right? So one of the things that used to play is Lost in Space, and it says Danger, Will Robson. So basically, I'm not covering everything here. I suggest that you get familiar with how I solved the first problem, which is really easy, right? And then researching the topics, either Python, Spark, I told you is really hot nowadays. Power BI is very hot nowadays, will allow you to solve more complex problems, right? So summary, the most recent version of Power BI Desktop comes with support for both R and Python. So you get, ggplot and so on. The ones that have pre-built and are not supported for Python are matplotlib, pandas, and seaborn. Okay, and pandas.plot is there too. Okay, however, these charts will not be supported by the Power BI service if you go outside this. Okay, so like that one that was the word cloud, it wouldn't be certified or wouldn't be allowed on the cloud service. It would just not show up. Another feature that was added I showed you was the transformation. So if you have some data scientists that have this really cool Python script to, maybe figure out a mean or something and adjust something in there, and that's what you want to do on a transformation data, you can run that. Okay. I see this Python scripting finding a place in development when out of the box or custom visuals cannot solve the business problem. Okay. So again, for the development, you have to set up Python side by side with Power BI, and you can solve this business problem if it's a niche case that can't do a regular visual or a custom visual that was published. And but otherwise, you can do some fun stuff here. So here's a bunch of references: Power BI announcements, Power BI scripts, the Anaconda stall, the Power BI stall, Python graph library, decision, iris dataset, and tips dataset, matplotlib, pandas docs, seaborn, and that's my biography. And thank you for spending time with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something, and I'm always available for questions. I might not get back to you right away because with this I'm extremely busy. But if you have anything, just send me a note.
John, thank you for the excellent presentation.
Hey, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't think we have any questions here in the side things. If you need to ask John a question, take yourself off mute.
So how's things going down in the Virginia area?
Pretty good. I mean,